The Galactic Integration Academy floated in the darkness of space like a giant metal flower. It was old. Some said it was older than most civilizations that used it. Every species that wanted to join galactic society had to send their people here for testing. The tests were simple in theory but difficult in practice. They measured intelligence, survival skills, and the ability to adapt. Park Do-yoon stood in the arrival chamber and looked around. He was the only human in this cycle of testing. 12 other candidates stood near him, and none of them looked like anything he had seen before. One was tall and covered in hard, brown plates like an insect. Another had 4 arms and skin that changed color slowly. A third looked like a walking rock with eyes. Do-hyun was 28 years old. He was a structural engineer from Seoul. He had spent 5 years building bridges, towers, and emergency shelters in disaster zones. When Earth's Galactic Relations Office asked for volunteers to represent humanity in the Academy's assessment program, he had raised his hand without thinking twice. Now, standing among aliens who were taller, stronger, and probably smarter than him, he wondered if that had been a mistake. The door at the far end of the chamber opened. A creature walked in that made Do-hyun's skin crawl. It was insectoid, with a long body covered in black armor, multiple legs, and a head that featured large compound eyes and clicking mandibles. It wore a silver badge that marked it as an instructor. "I am Instructor Velrith," the creature said. Its voice came from a translator device on its chest. "Welcome to the Integration Academy. You are here because your species wishes to prove itself worthy of galactic citizenship. Today, we begin the practical assessments." Velrith's compound eyes swept across the candidates. When they landed on Do-hyun, they stayed there for a moment longer than necessary. "I see we have a human this cycle," Velrith said. "Interesting. Your species has only been in contact with the galactic community for 30 years. Most species wait at least a century before attempting integration." Do-hyun said nothing. He'd been warned about this. Humans were new. Humans were unknown. And many species in the galaxy did not think much of them. "The first assessment is simple," Velrith continued. "Each of you will be placed in a simulated environment. The environment will be hostile. Your task is to build a shelter using the materials provided. You have 6 hours. The simulation will include weather events that test your shelter's durability. Those whose shelters fail completely will not advance to the next round." The 4-armed alien next to Do-hyun made a sound that might have been a laugh. "A shelter? That is the test? My species has been building structures for 10 million years. The test is not just about building," Velrith said. "It is about efficiency, resource management, and adaptation. Many candidates fail because they underestimate the conditions." Velrith walked along the line of candidates, explaining the rules. The materials would be standard across all simulations. No outside help. No communication between candidates during the test. Simple rules for a simple test. When Velrith reached Do-hyun, the instructor stopped. "Human," Velrith said, "I have read about your species. Soft skin. No natural weapons. No armor. You are endurance predators who evolved by chasing prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. Some call this impressive. I call it desperate." Do-hyun looked up at the insectoid instructor. "We survived," he said calmly. "Surviving is not thriving," Velrith replied. "In this test, I expect you will build something that barely functions. Your species has no instinct for engineering. You learned it only recently." Do-hyun thought about the bridges he had built. He thought about the emergency shelters he had designed for earthquake victims, for flood survivors, for people who had lost everything. He thought about his grandmother's house in the mountains, which his great-grandfather had built with his own hands and which still stood after 80 years. "We learned fast," Do-hyun said. Velrith's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. We shall see. In a monitoring room high above the testing chamber, Yoon Hana watched the exchange through a screen. She was a representative from Earth's Galactic Relations Office, and she had been assigned to observe the human candidate's performance. She was not allowed to help or communicate with Do-in. She could only watch. "He is calm," said a voice beside her. It belonged to Chief Examiner Torvund, a massive creature made of what looked like living stone. Torvund oversaw all testing at the Academy and had done so for 300 years. "He is an engineer," Hana said. "Engineers do not panic easily. Most species send their warriors or their scientists to these tests," Torvund observed. "Humans send builders." "Builders win wars," Hana said. "At least, that is what our history teaches us." Torvund made a rumbling sound that might have been thoughtful. "We shall see what your builder does." Back in the testing chamber, Velrith finished the briefing and led the candidates to individual transport pads. Each pad would send the candidate to their assigned simulation zone. The zones were identical in challenge, but separate in location. No candidate could see or help another. Do-in stepped onto his pad. Before the transport activated, he raised his hand. "Instructor," he said, "I have a question." Velrith turned, clearly annoyed. "What is it, human?" "The rules say I must build a shelter," Do-in said. "Are there any restrictions on what kind of shelter I can build?" The question seemed to confuse Velrith. "What do you mean?" "I mean, does it have to be a certain size? A certain design? Or can I build whatever I want, as long as it protects me from the environment?" Velrith's compound eyes blinked. "There are no restrictions. Build whatever you wish. The only requirement is that it must protect you from the environmental hazards." Do-in nodded slowly. A small smile appeared on his face. "Thank you. That is all I needed to know." Velrith stared at him for a moment, then turned away. "Activate the transports." Light surrounded Do-in. When it faded, he was standing on a rocky plain under a gray sky. The wind was already cold, cutting through his testing uniform like a knife. In front of him sat a large container filled with materials. Metal sheets, polymer cables, insulation foam, a basic power cell, water filtration components, tools. He looked around. The landscape was harsh. Bare rock, no vegetation, no natural shelter. In the distance, dark clouds were forming. According to the briefing, acid rain would begin in 4 hours. Most candidates would start building immediately. Time was short. The smart thing to do was to put up walls and a roof as fast as possible. Do-in did not start building. Instead, he sat down on a rock, pulled out a small notebook from his pocket, and began to draw. He sketched the landscape, the wind patterns, the angle of the coming clouds. He made calculations in the margins. He thought about materials, about physics, about what he really needed versus what he thought he needed. 30 minutes passed. 40. An hour. In the monitoring room, Velrith watched with growing irritation. What is the human doing? He is wasting time. Hana smiled but said nothing. Torvund leaned forward, his stone face unreadable. He is thinking, the chief examiner said. Let him think. On the rocky plain, Do-in finally closed his notebook and stood up. He walked to the container of materials and began sorting through them. But he did not reach for the metal sheets or the insulation foam first. He reached for the power cell and the water filtration components, and he began to build something that was definitely not a shelter. The device was small. It fit in the palm of Do-in's hand when he finished it. He had taken apart the water filtration system and rebuilt it with pieces from the power cell. He had added a heating element made from spare wire. He had created a small chamber where water could be heated and pressurized. It took him 45 minutes to build. 45 minutes of his 6 hours gone. In that time, other candidates had already raised walls and started on roofs. The four-armed alien named Thress had built an impressive dome that gleamed under the gray sky. A reptilian candidate named Morix had constructed a low, solid shelter that hugged the ground. Du Hyam had built a coffee machine. He filled the small chamber with water from his survival kit. He added ground coffee beans that he had hidden in his uniform pocket. The device made a soft humming sound. Steam rose. A dark liquid dripped into a small metal cup he had made from a piece of scrap. The smell of coffee filled the cold air. In the monitoring room, Velrith made a sound of pure disbelief. Is that a beverage maker? The human is making a beverage? It appears so, Torvin said. The stone creature's voice held something that might have been curiosity. This is absurd, Velrith said. He has less than 5 hours before the acid rain begins. He has no walls, no roof, nothing. And he's drinking hot water with plant matter in it. Hana watched the screen with a smile she could not hide. She knew exactly what Do-hyun was doing. She had seen engineers do this before. They did not rush. They prepared. They got their minds right before they started working. And for many humans, getting their mind right meant coffee. On the rocky plain, Do-hyun sat on his rock and drank. The coffee was not good. It was too weak and slightly burned. But it was warm, and it was familiar, and it reminded him of home. It reminded him of late nights in his university dormitory, working on designs that his professors said were impossible. It reminded him of early mornings on construction sites, watching his buildings rise from the ground. He thought about his mentor, Professor Kim Soya. She had taught him structural engineering at Korea University. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes, and she had changed the way he thought about buildings. Most people think engineers build structures, she had told him once. They are wrong. Engineers build solutions. The structure is just how the solution looks when it is finished. Before you pick up a tool, you must understand the problem completely. Rush the understanding, and you will build the wrong thing. Do-hyun finished his coffee. He understood the problem now. The problem was not just the acid rain. The problem was the cold, the wind, the lack of resources, and the limited time. But there was another problem too, one that most candidates probably did not see. The problem was that survival alone was not enough. He stood up and walked to the container of materials. This time, he knew exactly what he needed. He began to work. In the adjacent simulation zone, the reptilian candidate Morix paused in his building. His shelter was almost complete. It was solid, functional, and would protect him from the acid rain. But something had caught his attention. He could see the human zone in the distance. The simulation zones were separate, but not invisible to each other. Morix had expected to see a simple shelter rising by now. Instead, he saw something strange. The human was building walls, yes, but they were angled oddly. They did not form a simple box or dome. They rose at specific angles, with gaps and channels between them. The human moved with speed and precision that surprised Morix. An hour ago, the human had been sitting and drinking something. Now he was building like a machine. What was he building? Morix was young for his species. He had been chosen for the academy because of his curiosity and his willingness to learn. His elders had told him to focus on his own test and ignore the other candidates. But Morix could not look away from what the human was doing. Back in his zone, Do-hyun worked without stopping. His hands moved automatically, guided by years of experience. He had built emergency shelters and disaster zones where time was measured in minutes, not hours. He had designed structures that had to withstand earthquakes, floods, and typhoons. This test was difficult, yes, but it was not impossible. He thought about his colleague, Baek Ji-woo. They had worked together on a project in the Philippines after a major typhoon. The local government had wanted simple shelters. Cheap, fast, good enough. Good enough is not good enough, Do-hyun had said. Good enough is just waiting to fail. We build it right, or we do not build it at all. Jiwoo had laughed at him. Why do you always over-engineer everything? Because when the next storm comes, Do-yoon had replied, our people will still be standing. He applied that same thinking now. The walls he built were not just walls. They were angled to deflect wind. The gaps between them were channels that would catch acid rain and direct it away from the main structure. The metal sheets overlapped in a pattern that created multiple layers of protection. 2 hours passed. 3 hours. In the monitoring room, Velrith had stopped complaining. The instructor watched the human's progress with growing confusion. What is he building? That is not a shelter. No, Torvald agreed. It is not. Hannah leaned forward in her seat. She had seen Do-yoon's designs before in his application file. She had been impressed then. Now, watching him work in real time, she was amazed. He's not building a shelter, she said softly. He is building a system. On the screen, Do-yoon had finished the outer walls. Now he was working on something inside. He had taken the water filtration components that he had partially disassembled for his coffee machine and rebuilt them into something larger. A collection system. A purification unit. He is planning to collect the acid rain, Torvald realized, and convert it to drinking water. That is not part of the test, Velrith said. The test is to survive 6 hours, not to establish a water supply. There is no rule against it, Torvald replied. Do-yoon continued working. He built a heating system using the power cell and insulation foam. He created a secondary power generator from spare parts and wire. He reinforced the walls with additional layers. He sealed every gap, every crack, every possible point of failure. With 90 minutes left before the acid rain, he added something that made Velrith's mandibles click in pure disbelief. A small observation deck on the roof of his structure, with seating. This is madness, Velrith said. He is wasting resources on comfort, on luxury. The test is about survival, not relaxation. Torvald said nothing, but Hannah noticed that the chief examiner had moved closer to the screen. The stone creature was watching the human with an intensity that surprised her. In his simulation zone, Do-yoon climbed onto the observation deck and sat down. He had 30 minutes of work left, maybe 40. Enough time to reinforce a few weak points and check all his systems. But first, he made another cup of coffee. The second cup was better than the first. He had adjusted the temperature and the brewing time. He sat on his observation deck, looked out at the rocky landscape and the dark clouds approaching, and drank. Morix, watching from his zone, could not understand. The human had built something impressive, something far beyond a simple shelter. And now he was sitting on top of it, drinking his strange beverage, as if he had all the time in the world. What kind of creature built a fortress and then sat on it drinking hot liquid while a storm approached? The answer came to Morix slowly, like light dawning after a long night. The human was not worried. The human was confident. The human had built something that he trusted completely. He did not need to pace or check or worry. He knew his work would hold. Morix looked at his own shelter. It was solid. It was functional. But would he sit on top of it and relax while acid rain approached? No, he would not. For the first time since the test began, Morix felt something he had not expected to feel. He felt doubt. The clouds moved faster now. They were dark and heavy, filled with chemicals that would burn through metal and melt organic tissue. The simulation was designed to be harsh. The Academy did not want candidates who could only survive easy conditions. They wanted candidates who could adapt, who could think, who could overcome. Do-yoon finished his coffee and climbed down from the observation deck. He had work to do. He spent the next 30 minutes checking every part of his structure. He tested the walls for weak points. He examined the rain collection channels to make sure they flowed correctly. He verified that the water purification system was working. He checked the heating unit and the power generator. Everything was ready, but he was not done. He walked around the outside of his structure one more time. He looked at it not as an engineer, but as a person, as someone who might have to live here, not just for 6 hours, but for days or weeks or longer. The structure was strong. It would protect him from the acid rain. It would keep him warm. It would give him clean water. But something was missing. He went back inside and looked at the bare metal walls. They were functional, but cold. Empty. They felt like a machine, not a home. Do-hyun remembered something his grandmother had told him when he was young. She had grown up during a hard time in Korea's history. Her family had been poor, and their house had been small and simple. But she had always kept flowers by the window and a warm blanket by the fire. "A house keeps your body alive," she had said, "but a home keeps your spirit alive. Never forget the difference." He could not grow flowers here. He had no warm blanket. But he could do something. He took a piece of metal and bent it into a small frame. He placed his coffee machine inside the frame, creating a proper station for it. He arranged his tools neatly along one wall. He created a small shelf for storage. He made a comfortable seating area using insulation foam covered with polymer sheeting. Small changes. Tiny details. But they transformed the space from a shelter into something more. In the monitoring room, Dorith watched with growing frustration. Now he is decorating? The acid rain will begin in 15 minutes, and he is arranging furniture? He has time, Torvin said. He is wasting it. Hannah shook her head slightly. She understood what Do-hyun was doing, even if Velrith did not. Humans were not like most species. They did not just survive. They lived. They created comfort, even in the harshest conditions. They made homes out of caves and ships and space stations. It was one of humanity's greatest strengths. And also, some would say, one of their greatest weaknesses. The first drops of acid rain fell. They were small at first, almost gentle. They hissed when they hit the rocky ground, leaving small marks where the acid ate into stone. The wind picked up, carrying the drops sideways in simulation zones across the testing area. Candidates hurried into their shelters. The four-armed alien Thres sealed his dome and activated his environmental systems. Morix crawled into his low shelter and covered the entrance. Others did the same, hiding from the coming storm. Do-hyun walked outside. He stood next to his structure and watched the rain begin to fall. The drops hit his angled walls and slid down into the collection channels, exactly as he had designed. The channels carried the acid rain away from the main structure and into the purification system. He watched for several minutes, checking that everything worked correctly. A few drops landed near his feet, burning small holes in the rock. He did not flinch. Finally, satisfied, he went inside. The interior was warm. The heating system worked perfectly. He could hear the rain hitting the walls outside, but in here it was quiet and comfortable. He sat down in his seating area and made another cup of coffee. Through a small observation window he had created, he could see the storm growing stronger. The rain fell harder now. The wind howled. Lightning flashed in the dark clouds. He watched the storm and drank his coffee and felt something he had not expected to feel. Peace. This was what he had built. Not just walls and a roof. Not just systems and functions. He had built a place where he could sit in comfort, while the world outside tried to destroy him. His grandmother would have been proud. In the monitoring room, Torvin turned to Hannah. Tell me about this beverage. This coffee. What is it? Hannah thought for a moment. It is a drink made from roasted plant seeds. It contains a chemical that helps humans think more clearly and stay alert. Many humans drink it every day. So it is a performance enhancer? In a way. But it is more than that. It is also a comfort, a ritual. Many humans cannot start their day without it. It helps them feel normal, even when things are not normal. Torvald made a rumbling sound. So the human built a device to make this beverage before he built his shelter because it helps him function better. I believe so, yes. Interesting. Torvald looked back at the screen. Most species would consider that wasteful. They would say survival comes first, comfort comes second. Humans think differently, Hannah said. For us, comfort is part of survival. If your mind is not right, your body will not perform at its best. Do-hyun knew he had 6 hours. He spent the first hour getting his mind right. Then he built something that would have taken most engineers a full day. It is an unusual strategy. It is a human strategy. On the screen, Do-hyun had finished his coffee. Now he was reviewing his notebook, checking his calculations against what he could observe through his window. The rain collection system was working even better than expected. The purification unit was already producing clean water. He had built more than a shelter. He had built a sustainable system. He could survive here for days if necessary. Weeks, even if he had food. The acid rain grew stronger. The simulation was reaching its peak intensity. In other zones, candidates were beginning to struggle. Marx's shelter was holding, but barely. Water was seeping through small gaps in his construction. He had built quickly, efficiently, but not carefully. Now he was paying the price. Thress's dome had a different problem. The acid was pooling on the curved surface, eating through the metal faster than expected. He had built up, not out, and gravity was working against him. Other candidates faced other challenges. Leaks, failures, collapses. The simulation was not forgiving. Do-hyun's structure stood firm. He noticed something through his observation window. In the distance, he could see Morix's shelter. Even through the rain, he could see that it was struggling. Water was pooling inside. The reptilian alien was trying to patch gaps, but the acid was too corrosive. Do-hyun thought about the rules. No communication between candidates. No help allowed. This was an individual test, but he also thought about what he knew of Morix. The young reptilian had been watching him earlier. Curious, not hostile. Morix was here to learn, just like Do-hyun was. He made a decision. He went to his door and opened it slightly. The acid rain hissed against the protected entrance. He had built an overhang that kept the doorway clear, so he could stand there safely. He waved his arms toward Morix's zone. In the monitoring room. Velreth stood up suddenly. What is he doing? He cannot communicate with other candidates. Torvald held up a stone hand. Let us watch. Morix saw the waving figure in the distance. At first, he did not understand. Why was the human standing outside? Was he in trouble? Then he realized. The human was not in trouble. The human was signaling to him. Morix looked at his own shelter. Water was rising around his feet. The acid was burning through his scales despite their natural resistance. His shelter was failing. He had a choice. He could stay here and hope his shelter survived. Or he could run through the acid rain toward the human structure. It was a risk. The rain would burn him. But if he stayed, he would fail the test anyway. Morix ran. The acid rain hit him immediately. It burned. His scales smoked and hissed. But he was fast, and the distance was short. He ran toward the human structure, toward the figure waving in the doorway. Do-hyun stepped aside as Morix reached the entrance. The reptilian alien stumbled inside, smoking and burned but alive. Do-hyun closed the door behind him. Welcome, he said simply. You are safe now. Morix looked around the interior of the structure. Warm, dry, comfortable. Clean water in a container. A heating system. A place to sit. What is this place? Morix asked. Do-yoon smiled. My shelter. He walked to his coffee station and began making 2 cups. Do you drink hot beverages? He asked. Morix did not know what to say. He had expected many things from this test. He had not expected this. I do not know, he admitted. I have never tried. Do-yoon handed him a cup. Then today you learned something new. The storm grew worse. The acid rain fell in sheets now, so thick that visibility dropped to almost nothing. Lightning struck the rocky ground, leaving burned marks that smoked in the rain. The wind screamed around the structures that still stood. Many structures did not stand anymore. In the monitoring room, Vareth watched with a mixture of anger and confusion. The human has broken the rules. This is an individual test. He has given shelter to another candidate. There is no rule against it, Torvin said calmly. I checked. The rules say candidates cannot communicate during the test. They cannot receive outside help. But there is nothing that says one candidate cannot help another. That goes against the spirit of the test. Perhaps it reveals something about the human that the test was designed to find. Hana watched the screen with pride. She had known Do-hyun was a good engineer. Now she was learning that he was also a good person. Inside the fortress, Morix sat in the seating area and drank coffee. It was strange. Bitter but warm. His burned scales were healing slowly, helped by the clean air and comfortable temperature inside the structure. Why did you help me? Morix asked. Do-hyun was checking his water purification system. The acid rain collection was working perfectly. They now had more clean water than they needed. Because you needed help, Do-hyun said simply. But this is a test. A competition. If I fail, your ranking improves. Do-hyun looked at the young reptilian. Where I come from, we have a saying. It is not translated well, but it means something like this. A storm tests the house, but it also tests the person who built it. I built a shelter that can protect more than just me. If I do not use that ability to help others, then I did not really build anything worth building. Morix did not fully understand, but he respected it. A sound came from outside. A banging on the door. Do-hyun went to check and found another candidate there. It was Thres, the 4-armed alien whose dome had finally collapsed. He was badly burned, his color-changing skin now a uniform gray from acid damage. Let me in, Thres demanded. My shelter has failed. Do-hyun stepped aside. Thres entered, and his 4 eyes went wide as he looked around the interior. What is this place? Thres asked. How did you build this? Carefully, Do-hyun said. He went to his coffee station and began making another cup. Thres watched him with confusion. You are making a beverage? Now? In the middle of the storm? The storm is outside, Do-hyun said. In here, we are safe. Safe enough to have a drink and rest. Thres looked at Morix, who was sitting comfortably with his own cup. The reptilian shrugged, an expression he had learned from watching the human. It is good, Morix said. Bitter, but warm. Thres took the cup that Do-hyun offered. He drank. His face showed surprise. This is not terrible. High praise, Do-hyun said. The storm continued. More candidates failed. One by one, shelters collapsed or filled with acid water. The candidates fled, running through the rain toward the one structure that still stood strong. Some were burned badly. Others were merely wet and scared. Do-hyun let them all in. By the time the storm reached its peak intensity, 7 candidates were inside his fortress. The space was crowded but not uncomfortable. Do-hyun had organized them immediately. Some monitored the water collection system. Others watched for structural problems. The rest sat and recovered from their burns and their fear. Vareth was beyond angry now. This is unacceptable. The human is turning an individual test into a group project. And yet, Torvin said, he is succeeding. His shelter was not designed for 7 people. Actually, Hannah said quietly, I think it was. She pointed at the screen. The fortress was handling the extra occupants easily. There was enough space, enough air, enough water. The heating system was maintaining temperature despite the additional body heat. The structure was designed with margins for error, with extra capacity built in. Dohyun had not built a shelter for one person. He had built a shelter that could handle whatever came. Inside the fortress, Dohyun moved among the candidates. He checked their burns. He made sure everyone had water. He explained how the different systems worked so that others could help monitor them. You are strange, Thresh said. The 4-armed alien was watching Do-yoon with a new expression. Not arrogance anymore. Something closer to respect. In my culture, we do not help competitors. We defeat them. In my culture, we have competitors too, Do-yoon said. But we also know that sometimes the competition is not against each other. Sometimes the competition is against the storm. And when the storm passes, what then? We go back to being competitors? Do-hyun smiled. Maybe. Or maybe we remember that we survived together. Maybe we become something else. Allies. Friends. I do not know. But I know this. If I had let you die outside when I could have saved you, I would not have been able to live with myself. No test result is worth that. Thresh was silent for a long moment. Then he said, Your species is young, new to the galaxy. Many say you are not ready for integration. Maybe they are right, Do-yoon said. Maybe we are not ready. But we are here anyway. And we are trying. The storm began to weaken. The worst was passing. The simulation would end soon. Marek stood up and went to Do-yoon's observation window. Through the acid-streaked glass, he could see the devastation outside. Collapsed shelters. Burned rock. Destruction everywhere, except here. This one place stood untouched. I would like to learn, Marek said suddenly, how you build, how you think. When this test is over, I would like to learn from you. Do-hyun came to stand beside him. On Earth, we have schools for that. Universities. They teach engineering. Could I attend such a school? I do not know. But if humans are allowed to join the galactic community, maybe aliens can visit Earth too. I would speak for you. I would say you are a good student. Morex looked at the human. He had come to this test expecting to prove himself better than the other species. Instead, he had found something more valuable. He had found a teacher. The storm died. The acid rain slowed to a drizzle, then stopped. The clouds began to clear, revealing the gray sky above. Velrith's voice came through the communication system. The simulation is ending. All candidates will be transported back to the examination chamber in 15 minutes. The test is over. Do-hyun looked around at the 7 candidates in his fortress. They were burned, tired, and confused. But they were alive. He made one final pot of coffee. Drink, he said, passing cups around. It will help. Thresh drank. Morex drank. The others drank too. These strange aliens tasting a human beverage for the first time. Some liked it. Some did not. But they all drank. Thank you, Morex said quietly. Thank me after the evaluation, Do-hyun replied. We do not know yet how the examiners will judge this. But looking around at the faces of the candidates he had saved, at the shelter he had built, at the coffee machine that had started it all, Do-hyun felt something that scores and evaluations could not measure. He felt proud. The transport lights began to glow. The test was ending. Whatever came next, Do-hyun knew one thing for certain. He had done his best. His grandmother would have been proud too. The examination chamber was cold and quiet. The 12 candidates stood in a line before the panel of examiners. Most of them were burned, tired, and defeated. Their shelters had failed. Their confidence was broken. Do-Hyun stood among them. He had coffee stains on his sleeve and dirt under his fingernails. But he stood straight, calm, ready. Velrith walked along the line of candidates, reviewing data on a tablet. His compound eyes showed nothing. His mandibles clicked softly as he read. "The results are clear," Velrith said finally. Of the 12 candidates, only 5 built shelters that survived the full duration of the storm. The other 7 experienced total or partial structural failure. He stopped in front of Do-Hyun. "The human candidate presents a unique problem," Velrith continued. "His shelter did not merely survive. It thrived. It collected acid rain and converted it to drinking water. It maintained comfortable temperature throughout the storm. It had excess capacity that was not required by the test parameters." Velrath's voice turned sharp. "However, the human also violated the spirit of the individual assessment by admitting 7 other candidates into his shelter. He essentially turned a solo test into a group survival exercise. This makes evaluation difficult." "May I speak?" Do-Hyun asked. Velrith looked surprised. "You wish to defend yourself?" "I wish to explain." Velrith glanced at Torvald, who nodded slowly. "Very well, explain." Do-Hyun stepped forward. He looked at the panel of examiners, then at his fellow candidates, then back at Velrith. "When I was young," he began, "my grandmother told me the difference between a house and a home. A house keeps your body alive. A home keeps your spirit alive. When you gave me this test, you said to build a shelter. But where I come from, shelter is not just walls and a roof. It is safety. It is comfort. It is a place where you can rest and think and plan for tomorrow." He paused. "I built what I know how to build. I built a home. And when others needed shelter, I let them in. Not because I wanted to break rules, but because a home that you cannot share is not really a home at all." Velrith's mandibles clicked. "This is sentiment, emotion. The test measures practical skill, not feelings." "With respect," Do-Hyun said, "I disagree. What is the purpose of this test?" "To see if species are ready for galactic integration. But integration is not just about building things. It is about building communities, building trust, building relationships with other species." He gestured toward Morix, who stood nearby with his scales still healing. "Morix came to me for help. I could have refused. I could have let him fail while I succeeded. But what would that have proven? That humans are selfish? That we only care about ourselves? Is that the kind of species you want in your galactic community?" Velrith had no answer. Torvald rose from his seat. The massive stone creature walked toward Do-Hyun, his footsteps shaking the floor. He stopped directly in front of the human and looked down at him. "You took a risk," Torvald said. "By helping others, you risked your own evaluation. You risked being judged negatively. Why?" Do-Hyun met the chief examiner's eyes without fear. "Because some things matter more than test scores. Because I would rather fail while doing the right thing than succeed while doing the wrong thing. Because that is who I am. That is who humans are." Torvald was silent for a long moment. Then he turned to the examination panel. "I have reviewed all data from this test," Torvald announced. The human candidate built a structure that exceeded all requirements. His engineering was flawless. His resource management was perfect. He wasted nothing and created systems that would sustain life indefinitely. Velrith started to object, but Torvald continued. "More importantly, he demonstrated something we do not typically measure but perhaps should: leadership, community building, the ability to bring others together in crisis. When his shelter was full, he organized the other candidates. He gave them tasks. He kept them calm. He turned strangers into a functioning team. Torvald looked at Doyun. Humans have been in contact with the galactic community for only 30 years. Many species said you were not ready for integration. Perhaps they were right about your technology. Your ships are slow. Your knowledge is limited. But if this test shows anything, it shows that humans understand something many ancient species have forgotten. What is that? Velroth asked. Survival is not enough, Torvald said. Civilization is built not just on walls and machines. It is built on cooperation, on sacrifice, on the willingness to help others, even when it costs you something. He turned back to the panel. My recommendation is that the human candidate receives the highest possible score, not just for engineering, for integration potential, for demonstrating the exact qualities we seek in new members of the galactic community. The examination chamber fell silent. Morix stepped forward suddenly. I support this recommendation. The human saved my life. He taught me things I did not know. I came to this test thinking humans were primitive. I was wrong. Thresh stepped forward too. I also support it. My shelter failed because I was arrogant. I built big when I should have built smart. The human built smart. And when my arrogance cost me everything, he showed mercy. One by one, the other candidates who had sheltered in Dohyun's fortress spoke up. They told stories of how he had organized them, calmed them, given them hope. They described the fortress not as a structure, but as a refuge, a place of safety in a storm of acid and fear. Velroth listened to it all. His compound eyes were unreadable. His mandibles clicked softly. Finally, he spoke. The human's approach was unorthodox. It challenged my expectations and my assumptions. Perhaps that is not a bad thing. He looked at Doyun. I still believe your species is young and inexperienced. But I am willing to admit that youth is not always a weakness. Sometimes it is a strength. Fresh perspective. New ideas. Different ways of thinking. He paused. I changed my recommendation. The human should pass. With distinction. The examination chamber erupted in sounds of approval. Clicks, rumbles, hisses, and other alien expressions of agreement filled the air. Doyun stood in the middle of it all, coffee-stained and tired, but smiling. Hana watched from the monitoring room above. Tears were forming in her eyes. She had seen many things in her career with the Galactic Relations Office, but she had never seen anything like this. A single human had walked into a room full of aliens who doubted him, and by being exactly who he was, by building a home instead of just a shelter, by helping others instead of competing with them, he had changed their minds. Maybe humans were ready for galactic integration after all. After the ceremony ended, Morix approached Doyun in the corridor outside the examination chamber. I meant what I said, Morix told him. I want to learn from your people. I want to understand how you think, how you build, how you solve problems. Dohyun smiled. You should visit Earth. I will take you to my university. I will show you how we train engineers. It is hard work, but I think you would enjoy it. I would like that very much. They stood together in silence for a moment. Two beings from different worlds who had become friends through a storm. Finally, Velroth appeared. The insectoid instructor looked uncomfortable, which was an interesting expression on his alien face. Human, Velroth said. I wish to ask you something. Doyun waited. This coffee, this beverage you make. During the test, I observed that you drank it repeatedly. You seemed to find comfort in it. I did. Velroth's mandibles clicked. I find myself curious. What does it taste like? Dohyun's smile widened. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small container of coffee grounds. He had saved some from the test, just in case. Come with me, he said. I will make you a cup. Velroth hesitated. Then, slowly, he followed. Morix watched them go. A human and an insectoid walking together through the corridors of the Galactic Integration Academy. An engineer and an examiner. A teacher and a student thought it was a strange sight. But then again, Morix thought the best things in the galaxy often were. He decided to follow them. After all, he still had not finished his first cup of coffee. And he was beginning to understand why humans loved it so much. It was not just about the taste, it was about the sharing.